You're listening to the Coach's Journey podcast, exposing the struggles and celebrating the successes in the life of coaches who are action takers and creating authentic impact in today's world. Whether you're just starting out, expanding your reach, or exploding your impact, you're in the right place right now. Stay tuned and be sure to subscribe to this podcast. Now, here are your hosts of the Coach's Journey podcast.
All right, what's up, Coaches Nation? Here for another week where we get to have an amazing conversation with each other, Faisal and I, and you get to listen and participate in your head. And if you can comment below or send us a message, we would love you to participate in that way as well. We are going to talk today about a really, really critical aspect of coaching, and that is accountability. Because it's so easy to lose motivation, to lose perspective, to lose focus on what we're doing. And so an accountability, however that might look like in your life, is really a critical piece. So we are excited to be able to have that conversation with you today. But first, Faisal, share some wins with us.
I was able to adjust this mic a little bit. A big win for me, or a small win. I think a big win is that actually this year where I'm traveling quite a bit. One, it's on our personal side. Finally, we're able to go out, and we're going to spend about a month and a half in Europe, and while I'm doing my work. So that's like a dream kind of come true, which we have done in the past, but it's been a while since we did that. But also this year I'll be doing at least 2 or 3 events, and next year I'll be doing a retreat. So I'm really excited about that. And that's just, I feel like a lot of the things that I had worked on up until now, it's kind of, they're all coming together, especially the events and retreat. I'm excited about those the most on the professional side.
Well, that is awesome. My internet is super delayed right now, so hopefully you guys can hear me okay. So one of my wins, I would say, actually involves the Coaching Mastery community, who is our sponsor for this podcast. And it's exciting seeing the progress that our members are making, and also how it's forcing us as the leadership to be able to serve and provide some new opportunities. And that is honestly part of why accountability is even, is at the forefront of our mind, because we've recognized that that's a huge piece of value that we can add to the community. And so we're working on implementing that right now. And so it's exciting being able to be part of a community, part of a growth of an organization that is being able to have a super duper, and yes, I said super duper, positive impact in the world. So I love it. That's my win.
And just to add to that, those wins that I shared around doing events and retreat, most of them came from our community, collaborating with members in our community.
Yes. So the collaboration piece and being around people that are like-minded, that have similar goals, but you guys can kind of piggyback off each other, is just, it's a delight to be and to see that happen. I think it's so incredibly cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, do you want to unpack a little bit more our sponsor before we dig into the meat of today's topic?
Yes. So Coaching Mastery Community, our sponsor, it's a community of coaches where we come together to support each other, cheer each other on. But our focus really is to build our skill sets towards coaching mastery, and build our business skill sets towards business mastery to not only help us create a bigger impact, but also help us grow our businesses. And especially the business piece, we've worked on quite a bit the past few months to help our coaches, because coaches generally, at least the coaches that come into our community, they're generally very heart-centered and they're impact-driven. But the lack of skill set in business can really hold that impact back. They can create all sorts of frustrations in their life that doesn't translate to a sustainable business model, or a business model that can actually support people. So learning, getting in that process of not only being accountable to themselves and getting the tools and resources, but also being accountable to a whole community of like-minded people and not so many other ways to be accountable. I think it's getting incredible. And it's like Sherry said, it's challenging us to get better and better in our businesses. Because if we're going to challenge our members, then we need to do the same thing for ourselves. And just more than anything, just being part of the community, as Jeff always says, that it's a lot of times it's the family that we don't have. So that we wish we had, actually, I guess, putting it that way. So that's about Coaching Mastery Community. And actually, you can find out more about us at coachingmasterycommunity.com, which the link you will see under this video.
So accountability in our business as coaches. You wanted to maybe just share a little bit about kind of how you've used or how you have viewed accountability in your own life, Faisal, and kind of how you've grown things?
Yes, of course. I think it's probably one of the most, when I look at accountability, it starts with us, obviously, with who we are. Because at the end of the day, nobody's going to hold you accountable unless you're holding yourself accountable. It starts with our why, it starts with our mission, it starts with what we're trying to do. And I want to share a story around this. I think I might have shared this before too. Is that in the beginning stages of my coaching journey, like I didn't have the money to show for it that I was getting clients or anything. But when I started off, like I had a few tools and it was painful to keep. Like, for example, Kajabi was one of those. I was paying for it every month, but I wasn't using it to its capacity. And I knew that the money that was being taken out could be used for much more important things in my personal life, such as grocery and so many other things. But one of the reasons why I kept it is because that it reminded me of my mission. The pain of that reminded me of my mission, why it's important for me to stay on track, because every time I opened it, I would picture that there are many clients in that platform, not one or two, many clients, and this is going to pay for itself. And no matter what happened, I didn't remove that and a couple other things that were essential for how I saw my business. Now, that's just my approach to it. But that's just one way of looking at accountability, is that to me, this was important, even though I didn't have a lot of clients, even though there wasn't any evidence to show that I was actually building a business, even though I was not clear about a lot of things internally for me. This was important, and one way or another, this was going to happen. And so it started with that conviction that this is going to come to realization. And if I didn't have that accountability with myself, it was so easy to let go of the whole business, because it was painful for me to go through, but it was painful for others to watch me, to be honest. Everybody around me, I was like, it's like kind of watching a spider crawl up the toilet. There's a chance that the spider can get flushed down. And I was very getting close to that. But just that's a bad analogy, but I made it out of the toilet.
Good for you, Faisal. That's a win.
Now I'm in the bathroom area generally.
Are you at least out of the splash zone?
I think I am. I see it from a distance now. I'm like, oh, damn, I'm out of that.
Oh, that's funny.
So I feel like it starts from that, but then there are different areas of accountability. So initially for me, my accountability was what I told my wife. I always shared the vision of, hey, we're going to create this, as difficult as it was financially for us. And because I shared so much about my vision, I shared all my struggles, and she could see that day in, day out, I struggled with this stuff. Like, she knew that this was important to me. It wasn't a guess game for her, and she was there to support it, to no matter what. And this is really important, because a lot of times when you watch, like, especially couples in the process or people who are close to each other, they don't share the vision, and the other side doesn't know why they're doing this thing. why they're struggling with it. But when you share the depth of why this is important to you, what the vision is, what you're trying to create, that's not only going to benefit you, but everybody within our family and community, then that sends a very different message. And every time I shared with her, I knew that I need to stay here, especially knowing our challenges, especially knowing all the troubles that we were going through, that this needs to be worth it. If it's not worth it, then we're not doing this. So it starts there, and then we can talk about how we can expand to the professional side and other areas. But what are your thoughts, Sherry?
Well, so what I heard you say, your accountability to yourself was the most foundational aspect. Like, you had to be committed. And one of the ways was looking at your bank account, seeing this charge that was related to your business that you didn't really feel like you could afford, but maybe it was like a little external push for you to kind of continue the journey. And then you talked a little bit about making sure your spouse was on board and there being some accountability to your spouse. What did that look like? What account? Because, and I'm asking this particularly about the spouse scenario, because a lot of times, if we make our spouse our accountability partner, there starts to get to be this love-hate relationship in conversations, because we feel like they're now forcing us to do something. It's just, there's this weird dynamic. It doesn't have to be there, but sometimes that kind of thing creeps in. So I'm just curious how your own accountability internally and then your accountability with your spouse, kind of how that played out.
Yeah, and that I see the same thing with my clients as well. So you're bang on in there, where they will have somebody close to them as an accountability, but then there's a boundary issue that happens there, is that accountability becomes the other person basically kind of making them feel ashamed or guilty for not being able to move forward as quickly as they had said before. So there's a lot of shaming and guilt and all that stuff that comes into it. But when I say accountability, it's not that my wife told me what to do, what not to do. We bounced ideas, we worked through a lot of things, like we masterminded a lot of the stuff. But ultimately, this was my responsibility to move forward. So when I shared that, oh, I did this thing, it didn't work out, there was a lot of encouragement there. When I shared that, oh, I don't know if I want to work on this thing, this never worked out, there was that, okay, well, that worked to some degree. Don't you think that this will work a little bit better? So like it looked like encouragement. It looked like acceptance. It looked like seeing my struggle and pain. That's what support is. But then as soon as you come to a point where, oh, you said you were going to do that, but you didn't do that, you should be ashamed of yourself or whatever implies that, that's where it moves away from support. It becomes this thing where, no, you're not grown up enough to figure out your shit, so I have to hold you accountable, but basically shame you into doing something, which might work temporarily, but I think it creates more of an overwhelmed process over time. And this is why I talked about it specific towards vision. And a lot of times, and I've seen this over and over with my clients too, is that they don't, because it takes a lot of vulnerability to share your struggles and even your vision, how big it is. And you're at the beginning stages of it. And when you share it and you're scared that, oh, what if I'm judging myself to begin with, what if this person that's closest to me judges me on top of that? So there's a lot of pain in there. So that vulnerability piece is the thing I feel like clients stay away from it. They're scared to share more. But the declaration of this is that even 6 years ago, I had this conviction that this is going to happen one way or another. I could see the possibility. It's a matter of me trying to figure this out. And every time she saw that, but it wasn't just her. So there were a few people within my family. Even now when we have conversations, like, there was, when you used to share, like, I knew you were going to make this happen. I could see you were going through a lot of stuff, but I knew that, like, they could see the possibility the way I shared it, with my conviction, with why it was important to me, with the things that I was trying to do. So I was always open to sharing, at least with my support group, with all those things. Mind you, I did get backlash as well from some people. I did feel like some people weren't encouraging in my circle. But then my focus went towards the people who were supporting me, not towards people who weren't. I shared more with people who were much more supportive in the process. So the big difference is that, is your accountability partner using shame and guilt, or shame in the process that makes you feel guilty, or are they actually being encouraging, supportive, brainstorming, and not letting you get discouraged in the process? That's support. That's how I look at support to be.
Yeah, so we don't have shame coming from our accountability partner, but I sure know a lot of people that we, and I've definitely experienced this myself, where we have a healthy dose of self-shame. It's this balance between it's not happening, but I know I am capable of making it happening, and there's a gap.
So, Dr. Sherry, how would you describe a healthy dose of self-shame? I'm curious.
Well, and so when I use the healthy, I didn't mean it as like physically healthy, like, oh, it's a good thing to have in our life. I meant it as like a large dose.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That makes more sense.
Like,
because I don't think it's healthy at all to shame yourself.
No. Maybe I did not use that word in a way that everybody related to, but like I could just imagine like growing up. I love desserts. I imagine growing up, and I think that was kind of like, oh, that's a healthy dose of dessert, kind of like being sarcastic.
And that's just me being a new Canadian, not understanding all the stuff. Like, what was that? Ding it? Ding it.
Dang it. Yep.
I don't use that, at least, but I like it. I think I'm going to start using it. And that's like, coaches understand this very well, more than most people, because they understand that people shame themselves into doing all sorts of stuff, and it works temporarily, but then long term it creates all sorts of background problems. And then if it shows up in your relationships, there's a boundary issue there. You're not clear what kind of support you want. So if I just realized a couple of instances where that even came up with my relationship with my wife. It's like I did a bunch of videos. She's like, well, like she was getting frustrated because she wanted me to get better, but it's not necessarily that she shamed me, but she's like, oh, that thing that you're doing is not working. I knew that there was something I needed to tweak, but what she was saying I wasn't agreeing with. And then I had to be very clear. I'm like, I understand, but I'm trying something very specific. I know it's not working, but I don't want to try your thing. I want to try something that's authentic to my voice. So I'm like, I love your feedback, but also give me the freedom to try different things rather than for me to just do your thing. And eventually ended up being, I tried different things that she suggested. I tried my own things, and it worked out. But being clear on what kind of support you need from the people close to you is very, very important. And when you're not clear on those boundaries, what will end up happening, because we're all taught this, like it's very subconscious, where we will shame people. We will do, because it's just part of most families, is very normal. It doesn't sound abnormal when you tell people, well, you said you were going to do that, but you're sitting on your ass on the couch, but they don't know what's going on internally. With you in that moment, like, oh shit, maybe I shouldn't be sitting on the couch right now, and you're sitting there trying to process what the hell happened with the rejection that you felt yesterday. So that I think that boundary around it is important. And this is why I think this is what it takes for coaches to coach people better, because these are the problems that your clients deal with in a different environment. You would have to deal with the struggle and work through it and deal with it for you to be able to even coach people. This is our skill sets as coaches in our life.
I think so now I think is there's some good timing for maybe kind of unpacking a little bit. And we've never had this conversation, so I'm not sure what your perspective is, but guilt versus shame. Have you had those kinds of conversations with your clients?
Oh, all the time. It's like one of the most dominant set of is two of the most dominant set of feelings that people carry around with. They don't know how to label it, but it's there a lot of times. But as soon as you identify it, it's very hard to miss because it's constantly there with them.
Yeah. So I'll share a little bit about kind of how I view guilt and shame. I think guilt is very functional. I think it's there as a signpost for us, for me. When I feel guilty about something, it's because I did something behaviorally that violated my own value system. And I have guilt. I think guilt is there's a purpose to it. There's a value to it. I think it's a good thing. Like, do you want a murderer to not feel guilty? Like guilt is good. That is my perspective. Now, what happens is that when we act a certain way, we feel guilty. We realize there's this discrepancy between who we want to be, who we were, which is, and we have that sense of guilt, sense of not measuring up in our behavior. We then generalize that to our whole being. And all of a sudden, our action that was not measuring up becomes our entire being that's not measuring up. And I think it's feeling guilty about a thing, or and now all of a sudden you've generalized it to your whole self, your whole being. And that is where I conceptualize the switch from guilt to shame, because it's no longer feeling bad about a thing, it's feeling bad about yourself. And you're all of a sudden everything about you is horrible, wrong, bad, a failure. We let our minds go, it can easily go to that extreme type of thinking. What are your thoughts? How do you conceptualize guilt and shame?
Ooh, that's going to be interesting. There are some differences here. So I actually, you described it. I love the way that you described it. I make one more distinction there. And for my own understanding, I've actually considered shame and guilt both a negative thing. And here's what I mean. I have a third thing that I haven't added there that's there. And first of all, the feeling of guilt, it's an energy within us. It's this discomfort, right? Something is off. So that I completely agree that it's important to notice that. Now, how we label it and assign meaning to it matters. So I've added a third piece, which I separate from guilt. Let's take out shame. So let's compare guilt and conscience. So what you're describing when you were talking about the murderer, that we need the murderer to have a conscience. And conscience allows us to, and every human being, it's built into them. The only people who won't have it is probably serial killers. Something is off. There's something in their biochemistry that's off. That built-in system in our consciousness is gone. And that's why they can't feel it. They can't feel empathy. They can't they can't see people. They're stuck in their own system. So when I say conscience, is that we can differentiate between what's right and what's wrong within our own selves. We have a guidance system internally built into us. We don't need anybody to tell us how to make that work. If that's broken, that's where things go wrong. If you're not like, I can't tell you how many people, like including myself, have gone through life feeling the pain of not listening to that part of us.
Yeah.
We do it day to day. We know that it doesn't feel aligned with us to go and yell at our kid in that moment. And we feel the pain of that is like, that's not right. Something is off there. Or we shame somebody into something, or we attack somebody, or whatever happens, we feel it. So I call that signal from the conscience. So here's where I differentiate guilt. Now that's our internal system. Guilt, I consider it as something that comes from externally from the collective thinking. And it might be good, it might be bad. You need to differentiate it based on who you are or who you're becoming. So one of the key areas that I can talk about that is in religion. It shows up in religion. Almost like if you look at, for example, the monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, but also even other religions, Hinduism, guilt is a constant part of people's life. And when it's not helpful because here's what the thought process goes. somebody's sitting there, something happens in their life. For example, let's take, they watch a family member doing very well in their life and they feel jealous, right? And as soon as they feel jealous, guess what the second thing that comes up? They feel guilty about feeling jealous. And because they have a religion that tells them don't feel jealous, that's not that's a negative thing. Here's my problem with that. The problem is that religion will tell you not to feel jealous, and I'm not talking about religion, because religion I think is a positive thing. It's the people who have taught it, they've missed so many things in there. They will tell you don't feel jealous, but they won't tell you how to do that. They won't tell you what's happening with why are you feeling jealous. There is no exploration of that. It's like you need to punish yourself as soon as you feel that. So you feel jealous, then you feel guilty about it because you're taught that you shouldn't be feeling jealous. That's where the problem comes in, that you're taking an outside external perspective and you haven't matched it with what's happening. You haven't done more of a discovery around it. So then that becomes this process of constantly feeling guilty about all sorts of things that naturally come up for human beings. Yeah. Jealousy comes up, there's a reason for it. Probably because you feel like you can't do what the other person is doing. And there's a problem with how you're looking at what's possible and what's not. Or maybe even you don't even want that, but you think you should want that based on what other people are saying. So I like differentiating that, because then for me, my conscious is the thing that's primary. And if I'm picking up values from my environment, it needs to feel aligned with that. And how do I determine that? One of the best tools for that is that ideal version of myself. What am I growing into? Who do I want to be? What feels aligned with me? And that comes from my internal signaling process.
I think it's fascinating, and I don't want to rabbit hole down this because that's not why we're here. But for folks that are listening, I think there's an interesting fundamental difference in belief that Faisal and I have. Faisal, I think you have the fundamental belief that all of the knowledge you'll ever need is internal, and that's the source of the conscience, and maybe kind of all the things. I don't necessarily believe that. I don't think that we have everything internally already. I think there's things that we discover outside of ourselves. And so, as you were talking about that, I was just trying to pare down the difference of, because I still think that there is a positive value to that external sense of guilt, because I don't think that each of us necessarily has the full capacity for recognizing or having the full, most healthy conscious. I think there's fundamental differences, which is totally fine. And so I think some people maybe be a little bit more aligned with kind of your perspective, and that's, or may kind of be like, I don't know. So anyway, I just kind of wanted to call that out a little bit, which is
and it's fine. And to clarify, I don't think external is negative, but what I do believe is that it needs to align with your internal process, because if it doesn't, then you will create more problems later on. But like I said, we're essentially describing the same thing, that feeling of discomfort is important for you to notice. What meaning and belief you assign to it, what will help you make sense of it, is your own thing. You figure it out, what works for you and how you can make sense of it for you. But bottom line is that it's an important feeling to notice, and it's not something to dismiss. Obviously, I think we can both agree on that end. Now, as we move this forward, now, okay, so you're starting your coaching journey. You have your family, you have your self-accountability, you have your support group, hopefully, even if you don't have it. So now you're going out in the world, selling your services. You're offering your services. Who's going to keep you on track beyond that? Who's going to help you make sense of whether some of the things that you're doing are going right, they're not going right, something is broken, something is not. And that was the initial problem that I had, was I didn't know what I was doing was working and what I wasn't. And it's not that I didn't want to do the things that were working, it's just that I had no frame of reference around it. So when I got around, the initially Coaching Master Community used to be in the multiple different names, but one of the names was Inner Circle. When I got around the other, actually initially it didn't have a name. When I got around other members, which meant other coaches who were doing similar things, just in these conversations, I figured out so much with multiple coaches talking about what their struggles have been, what they have learned, what they've done that doesn't work, what they have tweaked, and me sharing what has worked and then getting perspective. And we're doing this back and forth on a weekly basis. It was completely transformational for me, because now it's not just my singular perspective. Now I'm getting this whole collage of different perspectives on how to move the business forward. I'm accelerating my progress now. Not only that, every week now I have to think about, okay, what did I work on this week? What can I share? It's not even that they're telling me to do something or not, but I'm automatically, as a human being, because I'm a social species, I want to belong. I'm thinking, well, what did I try this week? I have much more motivation now. So I want you to think about it as a coach. Do you have that support group in your world, in your coaching world? Are you meeting regularly with coaches who are actually trying things, not just saying that they're trying things, but who are actually trying different things?
Yeah. And one of the things that came up when you were talking about that, and sometimes you recognize what is and you roll with it. And so, there have been times where I meet with somebody on like every other week basis to just, this is what I'm working on. This is the progress I've made. And they share with me, and I have this natural desire to not disappoint. And so, it's not crippling, and I'm sure there's work that can be done on it, but you know what? It's there. I'm going to use it. So I recognize that I don't want to go to this meeting, not having done anything, not having made any progress. So I use that as motivation to kind of keep me moving forward. So it's kind of an external and internal motivation all at the same time. The other person's probably clueless, which is fine. And so I just, recognizing those things in yourself and harnessing it, using what is to help you do what you're, the path that you're wanting to go on and move forward, gain momentum, all of those things. I think, there can be some value in that as well. And so we had a conversation recently, if I saw, with a couple other coaches, and it was about, I don't know if you're going to remember this, probably will, but it was about, if you are working with peers who are struggling with the same thing, similar things, same mindset, and some of the same struggles, there can be a lot of value in that because you're all kind of going through the same struggles at the same time. However, if that's the only accountability that you're getting, the potential downside is that when you're meeting with them, you're not wanting to call them out on their stuff because that's your own stuff too. If you're feeling a little bit, you're lacking confidence this week, you maybe haven't reached out to some people that you could to talk about coaching, to talk about whatever it is that you're doing. You've not done that, and you're feeling a little bit of guilt, or your conscience is like, that's not consistent with what you want. And then the people in your group haven't. Are you really going to call them out because now that's your struggle. So anyway, there's a good thing or an upside, but a potential challenge when you are only using kind of your peers in that way as an accountability. I just kind of wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, and actually that's a coaching challenge too, is that if you're not doing, and this is where it becomes really important, if you're not doing your best in your life, you're going to hesitate to challenge your clients. It's just the most natural thing for you to do is to not go in there because you will feel that sense of guilt, that sense of conscience, however you want to look at it. You will feel that and you will try to steer away because it's painful for you to begin with. And then you're like, why would I go towards this thing? And none of this is a conscious process. It's just we steer away from it. And this is where the other accountability comes in. And this is why it's so important for coaches to have a coach. If coaches actually had coaches, and this is Rich Litvin goes into this, and one, it's an ethical piece of the whole thing. If you're going to offer services and tell people that this works, you better believe that it works for you too, not just for other people. And your clients will ask you at some point, by the way. I've been asked this several times by now. Like, who are your coaches? And not just like, do you have a coach, but who are your coaches? Where did they come from? And I've had to like specifically give details around it that no, I don't just have a high performance coach. I've had a conscious parenting coach. I've had a relationship coach. I've had a business coach. Like all these things, like not only add to your credibility to the work that you're doing, but it helps you get out of your own head. And every time you go into these sessions, the coach is not attached to your path. They're not in your world like your accountability group. So they're gonna need to challenge you. That's what you're paying them for. And as you get challenged there, then you connect back to the accountability group. Then you're like, okay, I feel challenged. I can be vulnerable. I'm not doing very well in this area, but how can we all kind of level up in this area? So I would definitely say if there's a coach who's starting out, you need a coach, especially that first year. That you're going to struggle with all sorts of things. All sorts of things will feel like everything is breaking apart and you're not going through a coaching process. You're going to feel like things are not working out, even though it's actually incrementally working a lot of times. And then your group that you're part of will reinforce that whole process. So I love that you brought that up, Sherry, because you're right. Like if you go into a group of everybody's doing the things that's not working, they're not going to challenge each other in a sense, a lot of times.
So we've got our own accountability internal. We've got accountability to those people that are in our family or really, really close friends, the ones that really care, the ones that maybe are financially impacted by our success or lack of success. We've got our peers, other professionals, other coaches who are doing similar things. They're at a similar spot than us relatively. And then we've got folks, potentially hiring our own coaches or getting our own coaches in some way. What other ways can we brainstorm that people can think about having a sense of accountability?
So it's similar to like we talked about coaches particularly, but it doesn't actually just have to be coaches. Like one of the things that I've gotten, like being connected to so many amazing people, is that especially people in the business world. And this is something I think it clicks in later on for a lot of coaches because they don't, like coaches are not salespeople. They're not business people primarily. Some are. And the ones who are, they're actually pretty successful in the business world. And so, but by the time it clicks in, they don't realize that they're building a business. They don't realize that they're building an enterprise in a sense. So they need to be connected to what works for other business owners because business is business. And being part of different masterminds and groups like that will help you kind of see it from outside the coaching world in a sense, because coaches might not realize their blind spots even within their own groups. But business owners will look at your business and be like, okay, what's happening with your marketing? What's your effort in there? What's happening with your sales? What are your KPIs? What like when you go into the like, what? I need to do that shit? Yes, that's how you run a business. Who are you getting support in this area? Do you have a team? If you don't, have you hired a virtual assistant? Like there are so many things that for me, I realized outside of the coaching world that like I learned it from real estate investors. I learned it from people who are in that business that I wouldn't have learned from coaches because they're stuck in their own processes. So being part of like different groups and masterminds and actually understanding how they're running their business, what business means, and consistently increasing your knowledge of that, because at the end of the day, this whole thing is a game. It's a game and it has certain rules. And the more you understand business people, and I think the objection might be is, well, I don't want to primarily be a business owner. I'm a coach. I want to create an impact. Well, guess what? The medium that's going to help you do that is a business.
Yeah.
And if you don't understand the rules of it, if you don't know how it works, you're going to keep hitting your head on the wall and it won't work. It just simply won't work. So I feel like those groups might be essential for your growth as well. It has been for me and many people that I know.
Absolutely.
I know you've been part of groups like that. What are your thoughts about that?
Totally agree. I think it's very different. At least it has felt very different. I jumped into entrepreneurship with a brick and mortar business 12 years ago. And I think you can't get away from the fact that it's a legit business when you have a building and you have a mortgage payment or rent. You've got people that you're seeing every day that you have to pay their income. Like, I think it's more, there's more urgency to treat a business, brick and mortar business like a business. But so I think the challenge then is those of us now that are doing, doing virtual businesses, doing like, I'm in my home office right now. I don't have any extra expenses there, and it's like, and we can easily get caught up on doing all the things yourself. I think it is very easy to fall into the trap of not understanding that this is truly a business. If you want it to be successful, you have to treat it like a business. And there's things that are implicit in that, which a lot of business owners that have an actual brick and mortar business, physical business of some sort, they get that because they have to function that way from the get-go. We don't, whether that's a good thing or ends up being a challenge. I think.
I love that you mentioned the distinction, because think about it, like a brick and mortar business has a huge overhead. And that pushes business owners, well, you better operate well, otherwise it's going to crash and burn in the next couple of months. If you can't pay the mortgage, you can't pay the employees, you can't pay any of that stuff, you can't manage your finances. Yep. So the thing that makes this business really amazing, it is a very low overhead.
Yeah.
The problem with that is then you don't feel the pain that the brick and mortar business feels.
Yeah.
That's probably intuitively one of the things that I did around that Kajabi thing, is that I kept certain things that made me feel like, okay, this is a business. I'm going to treat it like this, or at least try to treat it that even though I don't have a lot of overhead, this is still an expense. And actually over time, one thing I've done is when I'm looking at I actually start to, as I've done my taxes and stuff, I've actually tried to organize that I am paying quite a bit for this business. It's not obvious and apparent. Like I will look at my home as its home expense, but I've separated it. Even that's how I showed in my taxes, that I use this as an office space. If I went out there and rented a place, it would be a separate expense. Yeah. So like you can start to do that for yourself where you do have expenses. It's just that it won't be as apparent, like Dr. Sherry said, as a brick and mortar business. But there are other differences. The other difference is that, so when you don't have a lot of overhead, it's fine. You don't have the overhead, but when you look at the similarity between brick and mortar and the other one, is there's still a marketing and sales process.
Really?
The problem is that for a brick and mortar, especially if it's a business, let's take like a dealership. Like a dealership, they have monthly, weekly marketing stuff going out constantly. Like they have that as an investment in there. They spend quite a bit of money. I have a lot of family members in there on the marketing side of things. You will see this in your mail with all sorts of car stuff coming in for you. You will see the social media side of things. Now, when you look at like a coaching world, like there's no established system like a dealership or like a pizza shop or like a psychologist or whatever it is. There is no established business practices. There is no clear cut because it hasn't been recognized like a business yet. Once it becomes, then it will be like that. But right now there are no established criteria. So it's very easy to look at it and say, oh no, the normal rules of the business doesn't apply here.
It's interesting because I think you identified a gap in our industry of not, they're not being like done for you services. Yeah. And I don't know how that would look. And I think some people would argue you can't really do done for you services in coaching because it's got to be about you. I don't know. I think there's a middle ground. But what I mean by that is in my real estate business, my husband and I, we do a lot of off-market investing, and we pay a company thousands of dollars a month to market to property owners for us, and then we get the leads that way. So I think there's a gap in the coaching world on ways of being able to send the flyers out with the cars on them. So
there are services like that, except you have to go out there and seek them. They're not as common as it is in brick and mortar businesses. Like you can work with a marketing consultant or a copywriter, and you can build these things, and they can help you set up the whole thing, and you can send it out. But it takes a level of investment in there. Now, is it necessary to do that in the initial stages? Probably not, because you can do that without those things. But then it probably becomes, so for example, for me, I'm finding it's becoming more and more necessary because I want to scale it. So I want to go towards stuff like that. And we're doing it in our community as well. That we're going towards ads, we're getting them to set up. And it's not like a brick and mortar type of thing, but it's on the social media end. It's the same thing. We're hiring an organization, they're setting up our ads process, and at some point it's going to become a recurring thing that we run in the background. A lot of companies do it. Now, do you need that in the beginning? Not necessarily, but you need a structure like that. Whether that, and I actually made this differentiation to a client, is that like every business has its upturn and downturn. And like whether you talk about like the market is at a peak and then at a market goes down, you need to be able to do business at every stage of the market. So there are times where I don't have a lot of clients coming in. That's the time that my marketing efforts and sales efforts increase. Because I don't have a lot of clients coming in and I'm not spending a lot of bandwidth with clients, I have some empty spots. Now I'm going into prospecting and sales mode and marketing mode. But then there are times like right now I'm overbooked. Like I have too many clients. So that's an opportunity for me to reinvest part of that. So I've gone 2 certifications and gone towards getting coaching on the sales and business end. So this is a time for me to build skill sets. This is a time for me to get better at so many other things, because once the market goes in this area, then I can start to build systems and other things. And this is I feel like it's very common in the business world, but then we are not aware of it because we don't look at it like a business.
Right. And so like when I launched my business 12 years ago, brick and mortar business, before I ever launched, I spent a good amount of time. I got coaching from the small business development centers, SBDC, I believe is the acronym. The Small Business Administration in the US, they have these centers specifically devoted to that. They've got people that work there that will give you free coaching on how to build out your business plan, how to think about all the different things. I spent months going over that, and I built out a written business plan and did all that stuff. And I will be the first to admit, I did not do that detailed of an analysis on the coaching business before I launched it. But that might be a missing link for a lot of people, because I think it's easy, and I certainly have found myself doing this, that I start the coaching business, and then all of a sudden I feel like, oh my gosh, Joe Schmo over here he's doing X, Y, Z and A, B, C, D in his coaching business. I am like behind the game. I'm only trying to do A. And, so we feel like we're already failing from the beginning. But if we had a written plan, we would probably have already recognized that we can't do 17 things out of the gate. You just focus on one. And then when one hits a certain metric, then you add another, and that there's this progression that you have already kind of mapped out that makes sense logically. And so I think just kind of continuing to go along the lines of, and honestly, that's accountability too. If you're meeting, and the Small Business Administration in the US here, all the services here are free. They're free. There's coaches that will help you for free. And so these are resources and additional ways of being accountable to other people who know what they're doing, who can coach you, and as well as to yourself, because now you've gotten a written plan that you can go back to and be accountable to that.
Yeah, I love that. And actually, even in my local region, like our city Kitchener, it's about 300,000 people. But then, the government has like a plan where you pay like $50 a month. They help you with your marketing stuff and all sorts of stuff. I almost actually joined that. But right up before that, I got another opportunity. But when I looked at their system, it was actually pretty good. Had I known about that 6 months ago, I would have probably joined. And they didn't just have marketing for like normal like for brick and mortar. They had it for social media and other things. And they had like business mentors that would help you think through your business. You just had to submit a bunch of documents around, hey, like this is my business, it's legitimate, I'm trying these kind of things. That's all. But it was like literally $50 a month. That's nothing for a process like that. But we don't like you said, we don't look for this stuff.
Yep.
What did you say?
I said that's less than Kajabi.
I know, that's much less than Kajabi. I would have benefited from that at some point. But see, I didn't have that mindset around like this stuff. I developed about 3 years ago when I started meeting other business owners. I'm like, oh shit, this is a business. And there's a key problem in there. I want to share one last thing before we end this episode. So the idea of freedom is very, very attractive to human beings, but with freedom comes problems. We don't have structure. Like, and this is a cliche example of somebody who doesn't feel aligned with a religion that has rigid structures. But as soon as, let's say, they leave that, that's a disaster waiting to happen. And when you go out there, there are too many choices. There are too many ways of looking at things. And one of the reasons we built, like, human beings have religion is it helps them make sense of the world in an easier way. And now think of it from a business standpoint. A bit of brick and mortar business has a structure around it. You know exactly what needs to happen for you to build it. Now you go towards a business like coaching that doesn't have defined boundaries, and we don't know what works, what doesn't work. There's so many choices, so many development paths. Now you watch the next person trying this thing. Oh, let me try that. Then you watch another person trying another. You're like, I'm falling behind. What am I going to do? Freedom creates problems if you don't have a structure built into it. So like you said, Dr. Sherry, if you don't have a written out plan, if you don't have a strategy, you're going to keep jumping from one thing to to another thing. And one of the reasons that has helped me is that I'm focused on my community. I need to grow it at a certain level before I do anything else. So all my efforts with collaboration, with sales, everything comes back to funneling people into my community that gives me the cash flow that I need to do other things.
Yeah, that's great. This whole conversation has made me realize I need to go back to redo my written plan and everything I'm doing. My wheels are spinning and I'm thinking about things, real estate investing with my husband and his team. And I'm thinking about our coaching and all. So yeah. So I'm going to be accountable to you if I saw him. I'm going to get a written plan out.
Woohoo! Yeah, and hopefully you guys who are watching it, your wheels are turning too, and my wheels are turning too. The more I talk about this, the more I realize how passionate I am about this, and that's actually one of the reasons why I signed up for a coaching certification. It's actually coaching/consultant. It's a very different mix that you can actually bring consulting into coaching, but for businesses. But how do you do that? And then it's through Mindvalley. Like so far, I've gone through a few of the things. I'm so glad I signed up. But I never thought, like a few years ago, I'd be passionate about business, but I am, because I realized that it can create possibilities that I didn't know that was possible. And I can do it with keeping my values. Yeah. That was a huge thing for me. I can create a model of a business that aligns with who I am. I don't have to create a cliche story of a business that doesn't feel aligned with me. And that's a big objection that coaches might have. But the more I've gone into this, the more I've realized is that this is a medium for possibilities, not only for you, for your community, for the people you're going to serve. The more we get better at this, the more we help people understand that you can build something that's beyond what you think is possible, especially in this day and age where we find teenagers making 6-figure a month income. That's possible in this day and age. And if you're struggling, there's something off on the business end. All
right. Well, we'll end there. If you're struggling, there's likely something off on your business. And what better opportunity to have accountability, to have community, to get your own coach, than to become part of the Coaching Mastery community, because all of that is present in the community and in the membership. It's really quite a robust solution for coaches.
Yes. And we'd be excited for you to join us, because that's what we're trying to figure out. Well, what would it take for us to move coaches forward? And it doesn't exist anywhere. As far as I've seen, we have coaches from different modalities. Every coach, high performance coaches, conscious parenting coaches, relationship coaches, transformational coaches, they have the same problem. They struggle with getting feedback. They struggle with getting feedback on their coaching skill set, but also in terms of how they're moving their business forward. There is no structure. We help them build a structure within a safe, encouraging, and supportive community.
Yes. And we have just added to our repertoire, we have just added a success coach whose sole job is going to be touching base with the folks in our challenge, touching base with all of the members. And they are going to be basically, another way of thinking about accountability is somebody holds up a mirror to you. They're just reflecting back to you who you are, so you can see that, and then you can choose to make those adjustments and changes. And that's how I envision the success coach is going to be. Is they're going to be like, okay, Sherry, what are you wanting out of this? What are your goals? What are you shooting for? I'm the one generating all that information. So then when I meet with him next, he just holds up the mirror of what I said, and then I get to be like, yep, I did not follow through on the things that I was going to follow through on in these areas. And so, how can I problem solve that? How can I make sure that, the things that I value, I'm actually valuing with my time? And, it's just a continual process of getting better and refining our activities.
Yeah, and then it goes back to that accountability pieces and one of the reasons why we're adding this, and us added this, is he realized how important that was to be accountable to somebody who can actually help you problem solve the challenges, not just tell you, well, you should have done it, but you didn't, but actually help you problem solve some of the problems and help you track your KPIs and look at it like a business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm excited about that too.
All right, guys, I know that you found this hugely valuable, whether it was the things that we talked about got you to think about your own business in a different way. Maybe there's a new, thing or structure that you need to put into your business, a new accountability partner or person that you can, bring into your sphere to help you stay on course. Whatever it was, we would love to hear how you were impacted by this episode. You can send us messages to our website, the Coach's Journey podcast. You can make comments if you're watching this on YouTube, send them messages on Facebook, wherever you want to get a hold of us. We would love to hear from you.
Yes, and make sure you like and share this video to any coach that you think will benefit from this, a colleague that somebody that you've come across who's struggling with these things. And if we know coaches who are starting out, they will be struggling with this area. So definitely like and share this message and reach out to us and let us know your thoughts and under this video or messages. Let us know what your thoughts are, what are areas you're struggling with, and did you have anything you wanted to share from your journey? And also, we'd love to have you on our podcast. So you will also see the link for thecoachesjourney.com. You can actually submit an application to be a podcast guest with us. Please do that as well if you're interested to join us here.
All right, guys, have a fantastic week. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
You're listening to the Coach's Journey podcast.